The Boeing 747 shook violently at 37,000 feet. 3 armed fighter jets surrounded them, demanding they land in hostile territory. The captain's trembling voice broke through the intercom. "Is there any fighter pilot on board?" An 11-year-old girl stirred from her nap. She stood, calm and silent, and walked to the cockpit. When she spoke, every fighter pilot on the frequency froze. "This is Sierra, Hawk's granddaughter. I can help you." Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across San Diego International Airport on Friday, September 13, 2019, as passengers boarded United Airlines Flight 889 to Washington, D.C. The Boeing 747 was carrying 298 passengers on the cross-country journey, a typical mix of business travelers, families, and military personnel heading to the nation's capital. Among them was a small girl with braided blonde hair, wearing purple sneakers, jeans with flower patches, and a pink hoodie with cartoon characters on it. 11-year-old Sierra Mitchell settled into seat 18A by the window, carefully arranging her belongings in the space around her. She had a small backpack decorated with unicorn stickers that contained her tablet loaded with games, a well-worn copy of Charlotte's Web, and her most prized possession, a stuffed brown bear named Maverick that had belonged to her father when he was young. The flight attendant helping passengers stow luggage smiled warmly at her. "Traveling by yourself, sweetie?" the flight attendant asked gently, noting the unaccompanied minor tag on Sierra's backpack. "Yes, ma'am," Sierra replied politely in a soft voice. "I'm going to visit my grandpa in D.C. "Well, aren't you brave? I'll check on you during the flight, okay? If you need anything at all, you just press this button." The flight attendant showed her the call button, speaking slowly as if Sierra might not understand. Sierra nodded with a sweet smile, not mentioning that she understood the aircraft's entire communication system, could identify every component of the Boeing 747, and had memorized emergency procedures for scenarios the flight attendant had probably never even considered. She had learned not to share such things. Adults got confused when an 11-year-old talked about thrust-to-weight ratios or tactical air combat maneuvering. The passenger in seat 18B, a businessman in his 50s, glanced at Sierra as he sat down. "Flying alone? Where are your parents?" "My mom and dad are deployed," Sierra answered simply, arranging Maverick the bear on her lap. "They're Navy pilots." "Oh, that's nice," the man said with the patronizing tone adults often used with children, clearly not grasping the significance. He turned to his laptop, dismissing her as just another military kid. What Sierra didn't say, what she never told strangers, was that her parents weren't just Navy pilots. Commander Jennifer Siren Mitchell and Commander Thomas Blade Mitchell were both Top Gun instructors at Naval Air Station Fallon, two of only a handful of married couples who had both achieved that elite status. They flew F/A-18 Super Hornets and trained the best fighter pilots in the world. And her grandfather, Brigadier General Harrison Hawk Mitchell, United States Air Force retired, was a living legend. He had flown F-4 Phantoms in Vietnam, F-15 Eagles in Desert Storm, and had transitioned to F-22 Raptors before retiring. He had 17 confirmed aerial victories, had commanded fighter wings, and had trained 3 generations of combat pilots. His call sign Hawk was spoken with reverence in fighter communities worldwide. Sierra had grown up in a world of fighter aviation. Her earliest memories were of sitting on her grandfather's lap while he explained tactical maneuvers using model aircraft. By age 4, she could identify every fighter jet in the U.S. military inventory by silhouette alone. By age 6, she was reading her parents' tactical manuals when they left them on the coffee table. By age 8, she had logged over 100 hours in flight simulators, with her father and grandfather coaching her through complex combat scenarios. Her parents had tried to give her a normal childhood, enrolling her in regular school, encouraging friendships with other kids, limiting her exposure to military life. But Sierra was drawn to aviation like a moth to flame. It was in her blood, in her DNA, passed down through 3 generations of fighter pilots. While other girls her age played with dolls, Sierra built scale models of F-22 Raptors with astonishing accuracy. While her classmates struggled with basic math, Sierra was calculating intercept courses and fuel consumption rates in her head. The Mitchell family had a tradition. Every generation produced at least one fighter pilot who became a legend in their own right. Sierra's great-grandfather had flown P-51 Mustangs in World War II. Her grandfather had become Hawk. Her parents had both achieved Top Gun instructor status. The family expected Sierra to continue the legacy, but nobody rushed her. They let her learn at her own pace, absorbing knowledge like a sponge, developing instincts that seemed almost supernatural. But to the world, she was just an 11-year-old girl flying alone to visit her grandfather. The flight attendants treated her like a child who needed protection and gentle supervision. The passengers who noticed her at all saw a young girl with a stuffed animal, someone to smile at kindly and then ignore. Flight 889 pushed back from the gate exactly on time. Sierra watched through her window as the ground crew completed their tasks, recognizing each procedure, understanding the coordination required. The Boeing 747 taxied toward runway 27, joining the queue of aircraft departing San Diego's busy airspace. The captain's voice came over the intercom, warm and professional. "Good afternoon, folks, this is Captain Anderson from the flight deck. We're second in line for takeoff. Flight time to Washington Dulles will be 4 hours and 20 minutes. We'll be cruising at 39,000 feet. Weather looks good all the way. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight." Sierra settled into her seat as the massive aircraft took off, climbing smoothly into the California sky. San Diego's coastline fell away below, the Pacific Ocean stretching endlessly to the west. She pulled out her tablet and pretended to play games, but she was actually reviewing tactical aviation diagrams her grandfather had sent her, encrypted in what looked like a children's puzzle app. The first 90 minutes of the flight were completely routine. Sierra dozed off somewhere over Arizona, her head resting against the window, Maverick the bear clutched in her arms. The flight attendant checked on her twice, smiling at the peaceful scene of a child sleeping innocently, never imagining what knowledge resided in that young mind. The businessman beside her worked on spreadsheets, occasionally glancing at Sierra with the benevolent disinterest adults show toward children who aren't causing problems. Behind them, a family with twin toddlers struggled to keep their children entertained. Across the aisle, an elderly couple read books quietly. It was a perfectly ordinary flight. Sierra was deep in a dream about flying with her grandfather in an F-22 when something changed. Even in sleep, her subconscious mind, trained by years of her family's instruction, registered the subtle shift in the aircraft's vibration. Her eyes opened slowly, still heavy with sleep, but her mind was already sharpening, assessing. The aircraft had altered course. The turn was smooth, professional, but it wasn't a normal course correction. The angle was wrong. The duration was wrong. Sierra had flown enough hours in simulators and had studied enough real flight data to know when something wasn't right. She sat up straighter, pushing Maverick aside, and looked out the window. They were over desert terrain, mountains visible to the north. She checked her watch, they should be over New Mexico by now, but the terrain didn't match. They had deviated from their course. The seatbelt sign illuminated with a soft chime. The captain's voice came over the intercom, and Sierra's blood ran cold at what she heard underneath the carefully controlled tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a minor navigation issue. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. Flight attendants, please be seated immediately." Sierra knew that tone. She had heard it in her parents' voices when they debriefed dangerous missions. She had heard it in her grandfather's voice when he told stories about combat situations that went wrong. That was the voice of a pilot facing something serious, something dangerous, trying not to panic the passengers. She pressed her face to the window, scanning the sky with eyes trained to spot threats. At first she saw nothing but empty sky and desert below. Then her breath caught. There, at their 4 o'clock position about 2 miles out, a fighter jet. She recognized it instantly from countless hours studying aircraft recognition. A Chinese-made Chengdu J-10, a 4th-generation multi-role fighter. It shouldn't be here. It couldn't be here. This was United States airspace. Sierra's eyes swept the sky and found 2 more. One at their 9 o'clock, another high at their 12 o'clock. 3 fighter jets in a tactical formation bracketing a commercial airliner over American soil. This wasn't a navigation issue. This was a military situation. The businessman next to Sierra noticed her pressed against the window. "What are you looking at, kid?" "Fighter jets," Sierra said quietly. 3 of them. "They're escorting us." The man laughed. "You've got quite an imagination. There's nothing out there but clouds." But Sierra knew what she saw. And more importantly, she knew what it meant. These weren't U.S. military aircraft providing escort. The formation pattern was wrong for a friendly escort. This was an intercept formation designed to control and direct a target aircraft. Someone was forcing Flight 889 to change course, and the captain was complying to avoid being shot down. Sierra's mind raced through possibilities. How had hostile fighters entered U.S. airspace? Where were they forcing the flight to go? Why hadn't U.S. air defense responded? Her grandfather had taught her that in tactical situations, You don't panic, you assess, prioritize, and act. She was reaching for the call button to alert the flight attendant when the captain's voice came over the intercom again, and this time the fear was unmistakable. This is Captain Anderson. I need to know immediately, is there any fighter pilot on board this aircraft? Any military pilot with tactical aviation experience? Please identify yourself to the flight crew immediately. This is an emergency. The cabin erupted in confused murmurs. Passengers looked at each other nervously. The flight attendants moved through the aisles quickly, scanning faces, asking if anyone had military flight experience. Nobody responded. Commercial pilots had completely different training from fighter pilots. The captain wasn't asking for just any pilot, he needed someone who understood tactical aviation, air combat, military procedures. Sierra unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up, her small frame barely visible over the seat backs. The businessman next to her grabbed her arm. Sit down, kid. This is serious. Adults are handling it. Let me go, Sierra said quietly but firmly. I need to talk to the captain. Don't be ridiculous. You're a child. Sit down before you get hurt. But Sierra pulled free and stepped into the aisle. A flight attendant hurried toward her. Sweetie, you need to sit down and buckle up. This isn't a game. I need to speak to the captain, Sierra said, and something in her voice, some quality of calm authority that seemed impossible in an 11-year-old, made the flight attendant pause. It's about the fighter jets. The flight attendant's eyes widened. How do you know about Dash? Because I can see them out the window. Chinese J-10s, 3 of them in tactical intercept formation. And I know what the captain needs because my family has been training fighter pilots for 3 generations. I need to speak to Captain Anderson right now. The flight attendant stared at this small girl in a pink hoodie, holding a stuffed bear, speaking with the precision and knowledge of a military officer. Who are you? My name is Sierra Mitchell. My grandfather is Brigadier General Harrison Mitchell, call sign Hawk. My parents are both Top Gun instructors. I've been studying tactical aviation my entire life. Please, we don't have much time. Something in Sierra's eyes convinced the flight attendant. Against all protocol, all common sense, all rational judgment, she grabbed Sierra's hand and led her quickly toward the cockpit. Passengers stared in confusion and disbelief as the flight attendant knocked on the reinforced cockpit door with the emergency code. The door opened a crack and the first officer's face appeared, tense and sweating. What is it? Sir, there's a passenger who says she has fighter pilot knowledge. She's Dash. Send them in. Now. The door swung open and Sierra stepped into the cockpit, still holding Maverick the bear. Captain Anderson spun around, and his face went from desperate hope to crushing disappointment when he saw an 11-year-old girl. What is this? He demanded. I need a fighter pilot, not a child. Captain Anderson, my name is Sierra Mitchell, she said, her voice steady and clear. My grandfather is Brigadier General Harrison Hawk Mitchell. My parents are Commanders Jennifer and Thomas Mitchell, both Top Gun instructors. I've been training in tactical aviation since I was 4 years old. I know you're being intercepted by hostile aircraft. I can see them. Chinese J-10s. 3 of them. And I can help. Captain Anderson stared at her in disbelief. The first officer looked like he might faint. Through the cockpit windows, the fighter jets were clearly visible now, menacing gray shapes against the blue sky. This is insane, Anderson muttered. You're a child. You can't possibly dash. Captain, with respect, we don't have time for this, Sierra interrupted with a calm authority that seemed to come from somewhere beyond her years. Those fighters are forcing you off course. You're complying because you're afraid they'll shoot us down. You called for a fighter pilot because you need someone who understands tactical procedures and can communicate with military assets. I'm not qualified to fly this aircraft, but I understand tactical aviation better than most adults. Let me help. The radio crackled with a heavily accented voice. United 889, maintain heading 270. Descend to flight level 250. Do not deviate or you will be fired upon. Captain Anderson's hands shook on the controls. They're forcing us toward the Mexican border. I don't know what's happening. Our radios are jammed except for their frequency. I can't contact air traffic control or anybody else. I don't know what to do. Sierra stepped closer, her mind processing tactical information at incredible speed, channeling years of her family's teaching. Captain, may I use your radio? What? Why? Because those fighters are operating on a frequency they think we can only receive, not transmit on. But if we modulate our emergency transponder correctly, we can punch through their jamming on military frequencies. My grandfather taught me how. Let me try to reach U.S. air defense. Anderson looked at the first officer, who shrugged helplessly. What did they have to lose? Anderson nodded, and Sierra climbed into the jump seat, her small fingers moving across the communications panel with practiced precision. She adjusted frequencies, modulated the signal exactly as her grandfather had taught her during their long sessions where he treated her like a junior officer, not a child. She keyed the microphone. Broken arrow, broken arrow, broken arrow. This is United 889 Heavy, squawking 7700. We are being intercepted by 3 hostile aircraft, Chinese J-10s coordinates. She rattled off their exact position from memory after glancing at the navigation display. We are being forced toward Mexico border. Request immediate tactical assistance. Authentication code Sierra Hawk 247 Tango. The authentication code was her grandfather's personal identification, something she had memorized from his study wall where it hung framed, his final mission code from his last operational flight. She was betting that someone, somewhere in the U.S. military network, would recognize Hawk's authentication code and respond. 4:30 agonizing seconds, there was nothing but static. Captain Anderson was descending as ordered, the hostile fighters maintaining their positions. Then a new voice crackled through, American, shocked, urgent. United 889, this is Huntress on guard. We copy your broken arrow. Authentication code confirmed. Who am I speaking to? That code belongs to General Mitchell. Sierra keyed the mic again. Huntress, this is Sierra Mitchell, General Mitchell's granddaughter. I'm 11 years old. I'm a passenger on this flight. 3 Chinese J-10s intercepted us over New Mexico and are forcing us toward Mexico. Captain Anderson is complying under duress. We need immediate assistance. Another pause, shorter this time. Sierra, this is Colonel Roberts at Huntress. I flew with your grandfather. I need you to stay calm and give me exact positions of the hostile aircraft. Sierra provided precise tactical information, distances, angles, altitude, heading of each fighter. She described their formation pattern, their weapons loadout visible on the hard points, their fuel tank configuration that indicated their operational range. She spoke in clear, technical language, using terminology that made Colonel Roberts realize this wasn't a confused child making things up. Sierra, help is coming. We've scrambled F-22s from Nellis. ETA 12 minutes. I need you to do something very important. Tell me about the lead fighter. The one at your 12 o'clock high. Sierra looked through the cockpit window at the lead J-10. Single seat configuration. 3 external fuel tanks. Full missile loadout, appears to be PL-12 medium range and PL-8 short range. No external gun pod, so he's relying on internal gun only. The pilot is maintaining high cover position, classic combat spread formation. Outstanding, Sierra. You've been trained well. Now listen carefully. Those F-22s will intercept, but we need to keep you safe until they arrive. The J-10s can't know we're onto them yet. Captain Anderson needs to keep complying, but very slowly. Can you communicate that to him? Sierra turned to Captain Anderson, who was listening to her half of the conversation in stunned amazement. Captain, U.S. fighters are 12 minutes out. You need to keep following their instructions but slow everything down. Extend your descent rate. Take longer to make heading changes. Buy us time. Anderson nodded, his respect for this extraordinary child growing with every second. He began making subtle adjustments, slowing their compliance just enough that the hostile pilots wouldn't notice immediately. Sierra returned to the radio. Huntress, compliance is being delayed tactically. What's the hostiles' probable objective? We believe they're trying to force you to land at an airstrip in northern Mexico. Intelligence suggests a kidnapping scenario, high-value passengers on your flight that we're just now identifying. Sierra, I need you to do something else. Look at the fighter on your right wing 9 o'clock position. What do you see? Sierra pressed her face to the cockpit side window, studying the J-10 carefully. Second fighter, 2-seat trainer variant. Front seat active pilot, back seat appears to be... Wait. The back seater is wearing different equipment. Not a standard flight suit. Looks like civilian clothes under a harness. Sierra, that's probably the hijack coordinator. Not a military pilot. He's directing this operation. The J-10 pilots are likely mercenaries. This changes everything. When our F-22s arrive, they'll need to know which aircraft to prioritize. Sierra's mind raced. Her grandfather had taught her about tactical prioritization. Huntress, recommend F-22s target the lead aircraft first. He's the flight leader, most experienced. Taking him out psychologically impacts the others. The coordinator and the two-seat trainer will panic without military leadership. Negative, Sierra. We can't shoot them down, too much risk to your aircraft from debris and explosion proximity. F-22s will force them to break off with intercept maneuvers. But your tactical assessment is correct. Lead aircraft is priority. Captain Anderson interrupted. The lead fighter is signaling us to descend faster. They're getting suspicious. Sierra thought fast, drawing on every tactical scenario her family had drilled into her. Captain, comply but make it look like you're having control issues. Descend erratically like you're fighting turbulence or mechanical problems. Make them think you're struggling, not stalling. Anderson immediately began making the descent rougher, the aircraft shuddering slightly, the nose pitching up and down as if fighting control issues. The hostile fighters maintained position, apparently buying the deception. Huntress, how long now? Sierra asked. 8 minutes, Sierra. You're doing amazing. Your grandfather would be incredibly proud. Sierra felt tears prickling her eyes but blinked them away. Fighter pilots don't cry during tactical situations. That was one of the first lessons her grandfather had taught her. The radio crackled with the hostile voice again. United 889, your descent is unacceptable. Stabilize immediately or we will fire warning shots. Captain Anderson looked at Sierra with wide eyes. Warning shots meant they were getting desperate. Sierra keyed the military frequency. Huntress, hostiles are threatening warning shots. They're losing patience. Acknowledged, Sierra. F-22s are going supersonic. 6 minutes. Tell Captain Anderson to stabilize the descent. We can't risk them actually shooting. Sierra relayed the message and Anderson smoothed out the descent, returning to steady compliance. The hostile fighters settled back into formation, apparently satisfied. Sierra, Colonel Roberts' voice came through, softer now. I need to tell you something while we have time. I was with your grandfather on his last combat mission before retirement. He talked about you constantly. Said you had the instincts of a fighter pilot, that you'd be the best of the Mitchell legacy. He was right. Sierra's voice was small, young for the first time in this crisis. Does Grandpa know what's happening? We've notified him. He's on the line at Command Center. He wants you to know he loves you and to trust your training. And Sierra? He says to remember what Hawk always taught you. Sierra smiled despite the tension. She knew exactly what her grandfather meant. When everyone panics, Hawk stays calm. When the situation looks impossible, Hawk finds a way. When the mission is critical, Hawk never fails. That's right, Sierra. And you're Hawk's granddaughter. You've got this. The next 5 minutes felt like hours. Sierra monitored the hostile fighters, feeding continuous updates to Huntress. She kept Captain Anderson calm, explaining tactical situations in simple terms, helping him understand why they needed to maintain this dangerous game of compliance and delay. The passengers in the cabin were terrified, whispering among themselves, some crying, some praying. The flight attendants had informed them that there was a situation, but couldn't provide details. Nobody knew that their lives depended on an 11-year-old girl in the cockpit, calmly coordinating their rescue with military precision. Huntress, I'm picking up new radar contacts, the first officer suddenly reported, pointing at the navigation display. Multiple aircraft, high speed, approaching from the northeast. Sierra looked at the display and her heart leaped. Huntress, we have radar contact. Are those our F-22s? Affirmative, Sierra. Raptor flight, for aircraft, 60 seconds to intercept. Get ready. This is about to get intense. Sierra turned to Captain Anderson. Captain, when the F-22s arrive, the hostile fighters will probably break formation. Be ready for anything. They might try to threaten you to force our fighters to back off. Don't react. Stay calm. Our pilots know what they're doing. Anderson nodded, his hands tight on the controls, sweat beading on his forehead. 30 seconds. Sierra could see the tension in everyone's faces. The first officer was praying quietly. Captain Anderson was breathing in short, sharp breaths. 15 seconds. Sierra closed her eyes and did what her grandfather had taught her. She visualized the tactical situation from above, seeing all the pieces on the chessboard, understanding how the next moves would play out. 5 seconds. She opened her eyes and saw them, 4 gray ghosts appearing as if materializing from thin air, the F-22 Raptors arriving with devastating speed and precision. The lead Raptor shot past the cockpit windows at incredible velocity, performing a spectacular high-speed pass less than 100 feet from the nose of the Boeing 747, the shock wave rocking the commercial aircraft. It was a message, a demonstration of total dominance. The hostile fighters immediately broke formation, scattering like frightened birds. The J-10s were capable aircraft, but they were facing F-22 Raptors, arguably the most advanced air superiority fighters on Earth, flown by American pilots who trained for exactly this scenario. One Raptor locked onto the lead J-10, matching every evasive maneuver with contemptuous ease, staying glued to his 6 o'clock. Another Raptor positioned itself directly between the Boeing 747 and the two-seat trainer variant, creating an impenetrable shield. The remaining two Raptors took high and low positions, controlling the entire airspace. The radio erupted with rapid communication. Sierra heard the Raptor flight leader, call sign Reaper, addressing the hostile aircraft on guard frequency. "Attention hostile aircraft, this is United States Air Force Raptor flight. You have violated U.S. airspace and threatened a civilian aircraft. You will immediately break off and egress on heading 180. You have 10 seconds to comply." The hostile pilot's response was in broken English, panicked. "We are departing. We are departing. Do not fire." The J-10s turned sharply south, fleeing at maximum speed toward Mexico. The F-22s escorted them to the border, then broke off, allowing Mexican air defense to deal with the violation of their airspace. One Raptor remained with Flight 889, sliding into a beautiful parade formation off their wing. The pilot waved from his cockpit. Sierra could see his helmet, his oxygen mask, the American flag patch on his flight suit. "United 889, this is Reaper 1. You're safe now. We'll escort you back to course. Captain Anderson, you did outstanding work maintaining control of that situation." Captain Anderson keyed his mic with a shaking hand. "Reaper 1, I can't take credit. I had help from a very special passenger." "We know, Captain." "Sierra Mitchell, this is Major Davis. Your grandfather is my squadron commander. He's listening on this frequency. He has a message for you." There was a click, and then Sierra heard the voice she loved most in the world, strong and proud and filled with emotion. "Sierra, this is Hawk. You did it, little bird. You stayed calm, you used your training, and you saved everyone on that aircraft. I'm so proud of you. You're a true Mitchell. You're a fighter pilot in spirit, and someday you'll be one in reality. I love you, Sierra." Sierra's composure finally cracked. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched Maverick the bear and whispered into the radio. "I love you too, Grandpa. I was so scared, but I remembered everything you taught me." "You weren't just scared, Sierra. You were brave. There's a difference. Fear is normal. Courage is doing the right thing despite the fear. You showed more courage today than most adults show in a lifetime." Captain Anderson reached over and gently squeezed Sierra's shoulder. The first officer was crying openly. The flight attendant who had brought Sierra to the cockpit was standing in the doorway, hands over her mouth, tears running down her face. The F-22 escort stayed with them as Captain Anderson returned Flight 889 to its proper course. The passengers were informed that the situation had been resolved, that they were safe, but no details were provided. Sierra was quietly returned to her seat, where she sat clutching Maverick and staring out the window at the Raptor flying protective guard on their wing. The businessman next to her looked at her with new eyes. The flight attendants kept stopping by, not to check on a child passenger, but to quietly thank the young girl who had saved them all. Word had spread through the crew, if not the passengers, about what had happened in the cockpit. 3 hours later, Flight 889 landed safely at Washington Dulles. As passengers deplaned, confused about the fighter jet escort that had accompanied them to landing but grateful to be safe, Sierra gathered her backpack and her bear and prepared to face whatever came next. She was the last passenger off the aircraft. Captain Anderson and the first officer stood at the cockpit door, and as Sierra passed, both pilots saluted her. She returned the salute with the precision her grandfather had taught her. At the gate, a crowd was waiting. Airport security, FBI agents, airline officials. And standing in front of them all, in his old Air Force uniform with stars on his shoulders and ribbons covering his chest, was Brigadier General Harrison "Hawk" Mitchell. Sierra dropped her backpack and ran into her grandfather's arms. He lifted her up, holding her tight, and she finally let go of all the fear and tension she had been holding inside. She sobbed into his shoulder while he whispered that everything was okay, that she was safe, that she had done brilliantly. When she finally calmed down, he set her on her feet and knelt to her level, his hands on her shoulders, his eyes, the same sharp green as hers, looking into her soul. "Sierra, what you did today was extraordinary. You saved 298 lives using knowledge and training that took me decades to acquire. You proved that the Mitchell legacy isn't about age or size. It's about courage, skill, and the warrior spirit that runs in our blood." An FBI agent approached cautiously. General Mitchell, we need to debrief your granddaughter. What she witnessed, what she did, it's critical to our investigation. Hawk nodded but held up a hand. She'll cooperate fully, but remember she's 11 years old. She's been through a traumatic experience. Handle her with care. Of course, sir. In general? What she did in that cockpit. I've been with the Bureau 23 years. I've never seen anything like it. The debriefing took hours. Sierra sat in a private room with her grandfather beside her, answering questions from FBI agents, Air Force intelligence officers, and FAA investigators. She described everything she had seen and done with remarkable clarity and precision, using technical language that amazed the adults in the room. They learned that the hijacking had been a sophisticated operation targeting 3 high-value passengers on the flight, a technology executive, a federal prosecutor, and a Defense Department official. The plan had been to force the aircraft to land at a remote airstrip in Mexico, extract the targets, and leave the aircraft and remaining passengers stranded while the perpetrators escaped. It would have been a disaster. It was also revealed that the Chinese J-10 fighters had been stolen months earlier from a Southeast Asian nation and repainted, flown by mercenary pilots for a criminal organization. The U.S. response had forced them to abandon the operation, and Mexican authorities had arrested the ground team waiting at the remote airstrip. As the debriefing wound down, the lead FBI agent looked at Sierra with something close to awe. Miss Mitchell, I have one last question. When you were in that cockpit, weren't you scared? You're just 11 years old, facing armed fighter jets, coordinating with military assets, making life-or-death decisions. How did you stay so calm? Sierra thought about it for a moment, then smiled. My grandpa taught me that being a fighter pilot isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing your job anyway. He said the best pilots are the ones who can think clearly when everyone else panics. I was terrified the whole time. But I knew what I had to do, and I knew my family had trained me for this. I couldn't let them down. I couldn't let those passengers down. The agent nodded slowly. Your grandfather trained you well. 3 generations trained her, Hawk interjected proudly. My father taught me. I taught her parents. We all taught Sierra. The Mitchell family doesn't raise children. We raise pilots. We raise warriors. We raise protectors. And today Sierra proved she's the best of all of us. The story hit the news within hours, though many details remained classified. 11-year-old girl helps thwart hijacking attempt, read the headlines. Fighter pilot family legacy saves flight, proclaimed others. Sierra's face was everywhere, the little girl with the stuffed bear who had tactical aviation knowledge that surpassed most military officers. Her parents flew home immediately from their deployment, arriving 2 days later. Her mother hugged her and cried. Her father picked her up and told her she had made the entire family proud. Both of them, hardened Top Gun instructors who had seen combat and trained the best of the best, looked at their 11-year-old daughter with new understanding. The Navy invited Sierra to visit NAS Fallon and give a presentation to the Top Gun class about tactical decision-making under pressure. Standing in front of elite fighter pilots, Sierra calmly walked through her decision process during the hijacking. The pilots listened in respectful silence. At the end, they gave her a standing ovation. The Air Force offered her a guaranteed slot at the Air Force Academy when she turned 18. The Navy made a similar offer. Sierra politely told them both that she had 7 years before she needed to decide, and she intended to enjoy being a kid for at least a little while longer. 6 months later, Sierra was back to being a normal 6th grader, mostly. She still went to regular school, still did homework, still hung out with friends. But now she also spent weekends at Nellis Air Force Base with her grandfather, learning advanced tactics that wouldn't normally be taught to someone so young. She was in her grandfather's study one Saturday afternoon when he looked up from his desk and studied her. She sat reading a tactical manual, Maverick the bear beside her, completely absorbed. Sierra, he said gently, do you ever regret what happened? Do you wish you'd just stayed asleep on that flight? Sierra thought seriously. Sometimes I have nightmares about the fighter jets, about what could have happened if I'd made a mistake. But Grandpa, I don't regret it. Those people got to go home to their families because of what our family taught me. How could I regret that? Hawk smiled, his eyes glistening slightly. You understand something that takes most pilots years to learn. It's not about the glory. It's about the mission. It's about bringing people home safe. Captain Anderson sent me a letter, Sierra said quietly. He said his daughter is my age. He said she got to celebrate her 12th birthday because of what I did. He said he gets to walk her down the aisle someday, see his grandchildren, all because I was on that flight. How does that make you feel? Proud. And a little overwhelmed. That's a lot of responsibility for someone my age. It is, Hawk agreed. But you didn't ask for it. The situation chose you. And when it did, you rose to meet it. Sierra looked at the photos on the wall, 3 generations of Mitchell pilots, and now her photo in the cockpit of Flight 889. Grandpa, when I'm old enough to fly fighters, what do you think my call sign will be? Hawk considered it seriously. Call signs are earned, not chosen. But whatever yours ends up being, I know it will be spoken with respect. Because you've already earned that much. The Mitchell tradition, Sierra said thoughtfully. Great-grandpa flew P-51s. You flew F-15s and F-22s. Mom and Dad fly F divided by a -18s. What if I want to do something different? Sierra, the Mitchell tradition isn't about what aircraft you fly. It's about excellence, courage, and service. Whatever you choose to do in aviation, as long as you do it with skill and honor, you'll be carrying on the tradition perfectly. Sierra smiled and picked up Maverick, hugging him tight. 7 more years until I can start pilot training. It seems like forever. Use that time to learn everything you can, but also to be a kid. Have adventures that don't involve tactical aviation. Make mistakes that don't risk lives. Learn who you are outside of the cockpit. But I already know who I am. I'm a Mitchell. I'm a pilot. You're also Sierra. The girl who likes to read and sleep with a stuffed bear named Maverick. Don't lose that part of yourself. That part is just as important. As Hawk drove her home that evening, Sierra looked out at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. She thought about the vastness of the atmosphere, about the freedom of flight, about the responsibility that came with the knowledge she possessed. Grandpa, she said quietly, thank you for believing in me, for training me, for trusting me even though I'm just a kid. Hawk squeezed her hand. Sierra, I didn't give you anything. I just helped you discover what was already inside you. The courage, the skill, the warrior spirit, that was always yours. All I did was help you understand what you're capable of. Sierra smiled and looked back out at the stars. Somewhere up there, pilots were flying through the night, protecting their country, living the legacy that she would one day join. And an 11-year-old girl with a stuffed bear named Maverick knew, with absolute certainty, that she would be one of them. Because she was Sierra Mitchell, granddaughter of Hawk, daughter of Blade and Siren. The next generation of a fighter pilot legacy. And the girl who, at 11 years old, had proven that heroes come in all ages, and that sometimes the most unlikely person in the room is exactly who you need when the impossible must be done.